Well, now here at 4:30, drug maker Johnson & Johnson says it had a glitch in a plant that led to millions of doses being ruined. Now, joining us live is Dr. Ulysses Wu, infectious disease specialist at Hartford Healthcare. Doctor, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Now, the big question here, a lot of people wondering, did those vaccines from that bad batch get shipped out? So there could be bad doses here at sites in Connecticut or in other parts of the country.
So with the vaccines, there's also a lot of quality control that would go into place. So if anything was shipped out that had anything to do with a possible bad batch or bad vaccine, everything is recorded meticulously and should be recalled and would be recalled if that was the case.
Okay, so people can be rest assured when they're getting their vaccines here that by the time they arrive here, they will be safe.
Absolutely, yes. We should trust in the distribution system at this point, and they're going to make sure that they dot their I's and cross their T's to make sure that we get the safest vaccine possible.
Can you tell us a little bit about what goes on into the shipping of these vaccines and what that quality control is by the time they arrive here in Connecticut?
I wish I could tell you. I know about vaccines, but I don't know really the front end distribution. But they obviously have to be kept at a certain temperature. Everything is recorded and logged, and then that is rechecked once it is shipped out. So, but to be honest with you, I couldn't go into the depths of how exactly it is done.
Okay. With this whole big expansion with the vaccines that started today, with people being over 16 allowed to get the vaccine now, should people still be of the mindset that they should get whatever vaccine is available and not so much focus on the brand?
Absolutely. So what we're doing is we're shifting away from the numbers that the Moderna does this percentage and the Johnson does this percentage. The key points for all the vaccines that is important to know is that it prevents hospitalizations and it prevents deaths. So the point of that is that we want to take a possibly lethal disease and turn it into the common cold, turn it into something that is very mild, rather than focusing on the percentages at this time. So yes, the best vaccine is the one that is right in front of you, the one that you can get.
All right, Dr. Wu from Hartford Healthcare, we appreciate your time today. Thank you so much.
Dr. Schwell, vaccine shortages are a big story right now, and certainly getting more people vaccinated is a key part of getting us out of this pandemic. There's been some big news this past week with Johnson & Johnson releasing preliminary data about their vaccine candidate. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, so on January 29th, Johnson & Johnson and Janssen Pharmaceuticals released some preliminary data on their phase 3 trials on their new vaccine candidate. We want to go through that data and specifically how it relates to the other two vaccines that have already received early use authorization from the FDA here in this country. But before we get into that, let's talk about the mechanism on how this new vaccine works.
Now, each person has about 37 trillion cells in their body. And this screen is zoomed in way into just one of those cells. Here we have the cell right here. This is the membrane of the cell. This area here is the cytoplasm, and this area here is the nucleus of that cell. Now, do vaccines work on just one cell of your human body? No. They work on a number of cells, and that's kind of dependent on the dose. But what we're going to do here is show what a vaccine does to a single cell, and then you can multiply that. And whereas before, with Pfizer, BioNTech, and Moderna, they use lipid droplets to get the messenger RNA into the cells, this works a little bit differently. So let's go through the steps. As we can see here in step number 1, in the laboratory, what they've done is they've taken an adenovirus, which can infect cells on its own, has all the machinery to do that. And simply what they've done is they've taken the DNA inside of the adenovirus, and they've spliced in the information for that spike protein that is on the surface of the SARS-CoV-2 virus. And so here we have information for the cell to make the spike protein for the SARS-CoV-2 virus, but it's encoded into a double-stranded DNA segment in the adenovirus itself. And so this takes place in the laboratory, and the vaccine is made. Now, when they do this, they take out the parts of the DNA in the adenovirus that allows it to replicate. And so this virus, when it infects the cell as the vaccine, will not be able to replicate. So the proteins on the surface of the adenovirus are still able to interact with the proteins on the surface of human cells, which then allows it to infect, as we can see here, the strand of DNA in the virus, which is supposed to go off to the nucleus and does, and would normally tell the cell to make more adenovirus particles. Instead, makes a messenger RNA that gets transported out into the cytoplasm, where the cell machinery, instead of making adenovirus particles like it normally would, is now going to make SARS-CoV-2 spike proteins. And the same happens exactly as we would see from this point on in the Pfizer or the Moderna vaccine. So the difference here is that we're actually using an adenovirus as the mechanism or the vehicle to get the information into the cell. That's the first difference here with the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. By the way, this is also very similar to how the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine works. The other difference here is that this is a DNA particle that is going into the nucleus of the cell. Again, very similar to the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, making the messenger RNA and then onto the SARS-CoV-2 spike protein.
Okay, now we have a better understanding of how this vaccine works. I think what people really want to know is how does this vaccine stack up to Pfizer and Moderna and AstraZeneca?
Kyle, based on what we're seeing here with this data, I would caution, again, this is not published peer-reviewed data, but the data that we've been given is actually somewhat encouraging. There are some caveats to this, and you have to dive deep into the numbers to get the information that you need. The first thing off is that it's a one-time shot. It's not like there's two shots like you need with the Moderna and the Pfizer vaccine. If you look at the efficacy and how they define it, the definition of efficacy here is that the patient did not get moderate or severe disease. So mild was okay in terms of the definition of efficacy. Now, it's different in the other types of vaccine studies that we've looked at with Pfizer and Moderna, whereas any kind of symptoms is what they wanted for efficacy. So if you look at the efficacy of Pfizer and Moderna, that was 95 and 94% respectively. But remember, these were done at a time when the prevalence of variants, like the UK variant, the South African variant, and the Brazilian variant, were not really that prevalent. And so what's kind of stacked against the Johnson & Johnson candidate here is that they did their studies when there was much more prevalence of these variants. And in fact, they did the studies in those very countries on purpose where those variants were. So it's going to be interesting to see how that pans out here. But if we look at the numbers and we try to compare them as best as we can. 95% for Pfizer BioNTech, 94% for Moderna, and 66 overall percent efficacy for the Johnson Johnson. But if you look deep down into that and you look and see which countries they were in, you'll start to see that, for instance, in the United States, there was a 72% efficacy, where there's not a lot of variance. In Latin America, it was 66%. And then, of course, in South Africa, where that worrisome variant is in high prevalence, about 95%, there was 57% efficacy there. And so that, on one hand, on first blush, looking at that, you're like, well, this is kind of a disappointment. But in fact, this vaccine actually gets better with age. So if you look at the data a little bit deeper, you'll see that at day 28, overall, there was an 85% efficacy in terms of preventing severe COVID. That means hospitalization and death. Okay, and that's really what the whole purpose of trying to get this pandemic under control is to prevent severe COVID-19 that causes you to go to the hospital and die.
Look, thousands of people are dying every day here in the United States from COVID-19. And hundreds of thousands of people are coming down with SARS-CoV-2 infections every single day. So the one that's going, all of these work effectively at preventing the worst outcome, which is hospitalization and death. I would hate to see somebody wait to get the vaccine that they think was better, and in the interim come down with a case that could be fatal. That would be a waste, in my opinion. So the reason why there's so many of these is because we need so many vaccines that we can't just depend on one type of vaccine. So I'm glad there's different ones. It's another tool in our tool shed in the fight against COVID-19. I would say sign up, and whichever one is closest to you in terms of timing, get that one.
We now have 3 vaccines authorized for emergency use. 2 of them, the Pfizer vaccine and the Moderna vaccine, are both messenger RNA vaccines. And then we now have a 3rd one from Janssen, also the Johnson & Johnson company, which is a different format. It is an adenovirus vector vaccine. Adenovirus vaccines are not really new. We have already used them for things like the Ebola vaccine. An adenovirus vaccine is a virus that has been altered so that it can't make you sick, it can't replicate, and it has a special bit of genetic code that has been inserted into it that in this case causes your body to make a spike protein. There are the typical side effects that we see from all vaccines. The injection site can be red, it can be sore, you can have a little fever for 1 to 2 days after, you can feel muscle aches, and you can feel tired and a little headache. That's really it. And the nice thing about it is that because it's only 1 dose, the amount of side effects that people have and their severity is very, very small. When we take a 2nd dose of the same vaccine, we tend to have more of an immune reaction and more side effects. So people will actually get fewer side effects cumulatively over the series with this J&J vaccine because it's only 1 dose. What people should know about this is that it is a very effective vaccine. We already had 2 highly effective vaccines on the market, so people try to compare them, but you really can't compare them. They were studied in different places at different times, and the J&J vaccine was studied in places where there were a lot of the new variant strains coming out, but it still showed very high effectiveness, 85%, at preventing severe COVID, and there were no deaths in the vaccine group who received the real vaccine, and that's just phenomenal. People really should take whichever vaccine is available to them. They are all really highly effective. The upside of the J&J vaccine is it's only 1 dose. You need to wait 2 weeks to get the full benefit of the vaccine. Even then, we still have COVID circulating in the community. We don't have widespread immunity yet, so we do still need to practice our masking and social distancing for now.
And you discussed the mRNA vaccines for COVID-19, and today we have some good news. Johnson & Johnson, we have a 3rd vaccine in this battle against COVID-19. Let's talk about it.
Yeah, we're very excited about the addition of the J&J COVID-19 vaccine. I mean, the more manufacturers we have out there, the more vaccines, the quicker we can get people vaccinated and the quicker we can move past this pandemic. So very excited about having this new vaccine on board. This vaccine also provides additional flexibility and utility as compared to the other vaccines that are currently out there. The J&J vaccine only requires 1 shot.
Vaccine only requires 1 dose. This means that when supplies of it increase and it arrives in our community, we can reach more people faster. This vaccine is easier to ship, store, and administer as it doesn't need to be kept frozen like the current vaccines do. This means it is particularly conducive to mobile vaccination sites at community centers, houses of worship, and other public settings. As more and more groups become eligible for vaccination, this will be an incredibly valuable tool to help us get into the neighborhoods and ensure our entire community has easy access to the vaccine.
In Georgia, Colorado, North Carolina, and Iowa combined, there have been reports of more than 45 adverse reactions to the one-shot Johnson & Johnson vaccine. That includes 8 people who had reactions at the Cumming Fairgrounds site on Wednesday, out of 425 J&J shots that were administered that day.
My name is Tyson Bell. I'm a critical care and infectious disease physician at the University of Virginia. I was personally excited to see the Johnson & Johnson vaccine news and the trial that came out, and I expected to be authorized by the FDA. It has a couple of advantages. So the first one is that it uses a slightly different platform. So instead of the messenger RNA that Moderna and Pfizer uses, this one uses a viral vector, an adenovirus, and that's just a virus that causes the common cold, but it's modified so that it doesn't actually cause you to get sick. What it does do is allows a piece of DNA, so in opposed to RNA. It's a different vehicle, but the destination is the same.
Let's now bring in Dr. Anthony Fauci. Dr. Fauci is President Biden's chief medical advisor. And Dr. Fauci, we're really glad you're here to help explain what this really means. So people who just got the Johnson & Johnson vaccine are worried. What should they look out for?
Well, it depends on when they got it. It appears that this adverse event occurs within between 6 days and 13 days. So if you're beyond 4 weeks and you've had it a month or two ago, I think you really don't need to worry about anything. If you are in the time frame of within a week or two of having gotten vaccinated, remember one thing. This is a very rare event. It's less than 1 in a million. Having said that, you still want to be alert to some symptoms such as severe headache, some difficulty in movements, or some chest discomfort and difficulty breathing.
These are women of childbearing age. Does this suggest that it could be hormonal?
Absolutely. And that's one of the things that we want to investigate. There have been similar types of phenomena that have occurred during pregnancy. Clotting abnormalities are known in women who take birth control pills. So certainly there could be a hormonal aspect to this.
You pointed out this is less than 1 in a million chance that you may have this symptom. It's very, very rare. But will this fuel vaccine hesitancy?
Well, certainly that is a concern. The question that is often asked, Nora, does this have anything to do with the other vaccines, the mRNAs from Moderna and from Pfizer? Absolutely not. There's no negative or adverse or red flag signal coming from any of those vaccines, which is very good news. In other words, they are very safe.
Guys like Fauci get up there and start talking, he doesn't know anything really about anything. And I'd say that to his face. Nothing. The man thinks you can take a blood sample and stick it in an electron microscope, and if it's got a virus in there, you'll know it. He doesn't understand electron microscopy, and he doesn't understand medicine, and he should not be in a position like he's in.
Absolutely not. There's no negative or adverse or red flag signal coming from any of those vaccines, which is very good news. In other words, they are very safe.
Like Tony Fauci does not mind going on television in front of the people that pay his salary and lie directly into the camera.
In other words, they are very safe.